Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer for Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, joined down by my very dear friend, the one and only, my great assistant beat writer, the great Zeke Trezevant. Zeke, it seems like just yesterday the season ended. Now we are 16 days away from training camp. There's a lot of stuff going on we're going to dig into today because, as you know, once 4th of July is over, everybody's attention turns to training camp. The guys, they get the weddings, the vacations out of the way, and really in 2 days when they get hit the ground running on Monday, like one of them told me, man, I eat good for the next, I think he said 8 months, and then I finally get to go off a little bit. So there's a lot going on right now that people are not aware of. So I'm going to talk to you about several ones. First, I want to start with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. We have talked about them ad nauseum. Everybody knows about them. Everybody is aware of them. I got into great details yesterday about the battle, what's going to take place, and clearly Aiden's the favorite. He's if it's tied, it's going to Aiden. Gardner's going to have to win it. But I want to talk about Anthony Brown for a minute because this is a guy that while I don't project him to win it, it would not surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if he got second string and beat out Gardner, although I don't expect it. The odds are clearly in the favor of Gardner, but this is an athletic guy that they were very excited to get last year. He was brought in by Champ Kelly. AP loved him. The guys love him. I thought he looked very good in OTAs and mandatory minicamp. This is a guy that I don't think, again, we're not trying to pretend like, gee, we either one of us thinks he's going to unseat one of these guys, but he certainly could. And that means we've got to talk about him. I'd love your thoughts on Anthony Brown.
Yeah, so I think Brown is very underrated, right? And I think the coaching staff, I know the coaching staff believes in him. I know Tom Telesco believes in him. Telesco mentioned him in one of his earlier pressers in the offseason. He made it a point to mention Brown. Like he was like, hey, don't forget about him. It's not just two quarterbacks out there. But he's been playing well. He looked good. I even heard one media member say that they thought Brown was, there was times in camp where he looked the best out of all three. And that's not my words. That's somebody else that was watching the competition. So he's been getting
I
rave
was
reviews.
standing there with you when he said it, and
Yeah,
and
like yeah. So it's not crazy to think that he might win second string at all. Again, obviously Gardner is if for no other reason he's getting paid big bucks, so I would imagine he probably gets it. But let's not sleep on Brown. He's been playing pretty well.
absolutely agree with you. All right, so I predicted the 52 man. I know it's a 53 man. I predicted the 52 guys that I thought would make it. And then I said there's a lot of guys fighting for that last spot, but I'm not so sure that the last guy is on the roster yet. I know they want him to be. They don't want to have to go trade because anytime you trade, you got to give something up. Maybe a free agent, but there's not a free agent out there right now that just totally melts with the long term vision. I'm going to ask you this. Who are some guys that you think are on the bottom end of the roster that maybe are going to be fighting for that 53rd spot, but you think have a legitimate shot?
I think so. We were just talking about Brown, and I was almost going to say it a minute ago, but I honestly think, and call me crazy, but I think the Raiders might consider going with three quarterbacks and keeping three on the roster. So I think that he's an option. I think honestly, same with Dylan Labe. Like obviously he's going to make it, but I feel like he might be. You got three running backs back there already, right? So he might just be the fourth guy, the odd guy out, or they might slip him in. So they have plenty of options of those guys that might make it in terms of barely make it. Those would be my top two, along with maybe some other guys. But I think those are the top two that come to mind for me.
You and I disagree. I think it's a lock that Labe makes it, that they take four running backs, and I think it's a lock, especially with the new rule, that they take Anthony. So I think those two are locks. When I look at guys that I think, guys that could be on the bubble, MJ Devonshire, a young corner. I think for sure he's going to be a guy, and you want you hope your first 5 round guys make it. 6 and 7 round picks, if they do anything other than practice squad, you consider it winning. I like Devonshire. They just have so many corners when you look at Jack and Nate and Face. When you look at DeCamerion, there's a lot of guys there. Jacorian. There's so many guys. I think he may have a shot of making that 53. Though that's another guy I think's out there and a guy that's going to be interesting. I don't think there's any doubt Delmar Glaze makes it.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
think he's on there for sure. Would you agree with Delmar?
With Delmar, yes. Yeah, I think the coaching staff and the front office in terms of Delmar specifically, they're hanging. I don't want to say they're hanging their hat on him, but that's somebody that they want to succeed. They want to prove a lot of people wrong with that draft pick. So I believe that he's for sure going to make it.
Yep, agree with you. All right, I want to switch a direction a little bit. I want to talk about pressure and Antonio Pierce. Okay. This is a guy that I think handles pressure extremely well. I think it's because he played at such a high level. He just gets it and understand it. But expectations are different now. He's not a guy trying to win the job. It is his job. I have been impressed, and I've talked about this all off season, the way he has conducted himself. He really hasn't changed. The players don't think that he's changed. He's got a tremendous staff around him. Do I think he feels pressure? Yes, but I don't think he feels stress, and there's a difference. I'd love your take.
Yeah, I think the previous coaching staff felt stressed out a lot. I think here it's a little bit different, right? And I 1,000% agree with you. Like, this man played in the Super Bowl. He won the Super Bowl, starting linebacker. That's a lot of pressure. You're playing against the only second undefeated team in NFL history to get that far. That's pressure, right? In terms of the game, right? So he's experienced pressure as a player. I think the pressure that he feels now is less. It's not nearly as much, and it's different, right? I think here his pressure is a little bit more behind closed doors in a sense, because I think he's too in tune with himself to let any of the outside noise get to him. So I think the pressure that he feels is probably pressure that he puts on himself to succeed more than anybody else.
All right. Now, you're a lifelong Raider fan, you admit it, and you're a California kid. You live in Nevada now, but you were not born, but you lived in Cali for a while.
Yes, sir.
And so I want to talk about Costa Mesa. I don't want to get into the fan aspect because I think that's still being worked out with the NFL. But what do you think of them putting camp in Costa Mesa?
I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons. And like you said, the fan aspect, that's one aspect all in itself. I do think the weather aspect is huge. And I think the change of scenery is huge, is going to be huge for those guys. AP alluded to it again earlier this offseason, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? A lot of other teams travel to other places for their training camp. The Raiders just have such a great facility in Las Vegas that there's really no need to leave it. So I think in terms of getting out to LA or out to Costa Mesa, it gives them a change of scenery. And I think with these guys, with them being around each other so much, a change of scenery is a bigger deal than what most people think. Just them being in a different environment, it goes a long way, right? Now we're, sleeping in bunk beds, whatever it may be, kind of staying together outside of our normal time together. I think it goes a long way in building camaraderie.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be in bunk beds. I think they'll be in luxurious hotels, but still. I want to go a little bit of a different look. In the month of June here in Vegas, 28 of the 30 days were triple digits, the hottest June ever. Expecting early next week to have the highest recorded temperature in Vegas history. I think getting out of that heat, I know there was a lot of people, not players, that were really frustrated last year with Josh McDaniels wanting to hold practices, the times that he did. John Gruden at least went early. Josh McDaniels went early, but a lot of people didn't think early enough. I think it irritated a lot of people. And although he has not specifically told me that, I think it irritated AP. That's part of the reason why he wanted to go. Just from the weather standpoint, I mean, you and I are baking today. Just from the weather standpoint, how big of a deal is it to get out of the Vegas heat?
Listen, I don't think the average like if you've never been in Las Vegas in the middle of the summer without pads on, I think it's hard to understand. It's miserable just walking out the door. Now, it's not humid necessarily, but it's just so hot that it doesn't matter that it's not humid. Routinely, in no exaggeration, it's routinely 115 degrees for days on end, weeks on end sometimes in Las Vegas. It's hot. You're in the desert. right? So I think that play, so now put yourself in a football player's position where you got the helmet on, you got pounds of pads on you, you're running full speed, into another human being, running full speed into you. It doesn't matter how good of a shape you're in, that wears on you, that tears on you after a while, and they won't have to worry about that nearly as much, obviously, in Costa Mesa.
No, and the thing that gets me is like when I first moved to Vegas in 2020, when the Raiders came, I remember I had to go to do an appearance. So I'm in a 3-piece suit and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm gonna die. And you're out there and you don't sweat. It evaporates so fast, you don't sweat. There's always a breeze. And I remember my very first day, Zeke, I dehydrated. And I said to him, how can I dehydrate? I mean, I'm in a suit. I'm not sweaty. That was the thing. I would take my suit off and I would not a drop of sweat. And I dehydrated because you sweat so much, it evaporates. There are just things that last year when I saw practice, I liked the way Gruden did it. But when I saw practice last year with Josh, it just didn't make sense to me. I kept thinking, what are they thinking? I think it's a smart move. All right. I want to change subjects, but it's one that I've only talked about twice on the podcast since the announcement of them going to Costa Mesa. But it's something I think needs to be discussed. For years, when Al Davis owned this team, the Raiders were broke. They didn't have much money at all. They were considered by many a very cheap franchise. I don't think that they were cheap. I just think they were very frugal within the bounds of what they had. They are rolling in dough now. They're one of the wealthiest franchises in the NFL. They got plenty of cash to do anything. Money is no longer an issue. And God bless Mark Davis. He did a phenomenal job doing something that his dad couldn't do. He got the Raiders to progress without a lawsuit. The fact, though, he's got to move security, strength staff, security staff, coaching staff. He's got to move all the players, all the ancillary workers, all the equipment, all the cooks, everything to Costa Mesa. This is costing him millions. I don't think he's getting enough credit because a lot of people still like him, cop about him being broke. I don't think this man's getting enough credit. He's stepping to the pump saying, I'll spend any amount of money, just win, baby.
And he's got to bring it all back, right? It's not just getting it there. You got to pay to get it back to Vegas. So he's investing, right? That's the word. And from his position, that's about all he can really do, right? He's investing the money, right? He's investing the time. He's investing the resources to getting a better team on the football field. So he's doing all he can. You can't really blame him. No matter what happens, he's put into the team, right? A lot of owners don't put into the team, right? It's not that hard to look around the NFL and find an owner that does not put into the team, right? So Mark Davis between the facilities,
there's quite a few.
There's plenty, right? There's plenty. So Mark Davis has put in the obviously state-of-the-art facility, right? World-class facility in Las Vegas. Now you're moving people from the state-of-the-art. Every player that has stepped foot, even if they're not Raiders, if they've stepped into that facility, they love it, right? It's one of the best. So think about now you're investing millions to move away from $1 million facility that you've already built. And then you have to move. That's investing, right? That's a huge deal. So he's done all he can in terms of the broke aspect. Come on, we're talking about $1 billion stadium, right? Billions of dollars have gone just into the stadium aspect, right? Think about the money that he's put in and that he's put into this organization. It speaks for itself.
You know, when you look at the stadium, it's built by tax money, and you look at the Henderson facility, a couple of $100 million facility there. When you just look at everything that Mark has done, it screams class. He's done it classy. You can argue with some of his decisions, and I certainly don't agree with them all. But the man deserves his credit for what he's done. I think it's been very impressive. All right. I'm going to give you some names, and I want you to tell me if they're under pressure or not under pressure.
Okay.
And I want you to give me a reason why, and then I'll give you mine. Let's start Davante Adams. Do you think he's under pressure?
Do I think that's a good one? Davante, I would not have guessed you were going to start this with Davante Adams. Do I think he's under pressure? Overall, no, but I do think he is under his own, again, personal pressure because every player wants to win a Super Bowl. They want to play for those important games. In that sense, I do think that he feels a certain sense of, hey, time is winding down. So I think in a sense, yes, he is under pressure.
Hey, I'm glad that you differentiated. I thought we would disagree there. I think he is absolutely under pressure, but it's the pressure he puts on himself.
Mhm.
I don't think there's stress. I think there's pressure. I think that's one of the things that makes him, you kids use the word chill. And I think that's one of the things that makes him chill. And for those of you old like me that don't spend enough time among the youngsters like Zeke, it just means relaxed. Am I right?
That's exactly right.
I don't know why you just don't say relax, but okay.
Relax.
But I think what?
I was just saying relax. Yeah, just say it. Relax.
Yeah. So, but I think one of the things that makes him the way he is and has made him great is great players, no matter the sport, have so much more pressure on them than they feel outside. All right, now I'm going to give you another name, Nate Hobbs.
Nate is under pressure because the defense needs him so badly. Because the defense, again, he plays so, he covers so many, he covers such a wide range of the football field and so many different players. He can't have a bad season. He can't get yes, he's under pressure. The short answer is yes, he's under pressure, but only because he has shown that he can be successful. Right? We know his potential. We know how great he can be. The Raiders need him to be that every game. Yeah, so he is under pressure.
And I'm going to go a step further. I think he's absolutely under pressure, and I'm going to give you why. Darren Waller upset a lot of people who thought he could play, and he didn't. And you know as well as I do, when a guy's hurt, a guy's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
When he's injured, he's injured. There's two different things. I do not ever believe Nate did not play when he could, and I have never heard that from his teammates. I want to make that very clear. But he's also gets hurt every year. And with him wanting big money and him wanting that extension and that long-term marriage, I think he is absolutely under pressure that, hey, when you're healthy, you are a huge part of this team. But boy, every year you miss time. I think there's a huge pressure on him. He needs to go a whole season without an injury. I'd love your thoughts.
Yes, sir. I agree with it. Right. In terms of the long-term contract he's asking for, he has to prove that he's worth it on a long-term scale, and that includes being available. Right. We always say the greatest ability is availability. They need him out there, right? And that's just on top of the fact that he's so important to the defense.
100% agree with you, Zeke. Can't argue with that at all. All right, here's a couple more names. Kolton Miller. Do you think there's some pressure on him? And I'm going to tell you, I want your answer, then I'm going to tell you where I'm going with this.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, okay, yeah. So, quick answer. We can say yes to almost everybody, but I don't think there's pressure on Kolton Miller because he's played so well over his entire career. Really, he played well last season. Now, obviously, he missed some time. From that sense, yes, pressure to be there. But I think his absence also showed how important he is. So that's kind of what makes me feel like, and overall, no. Now, technically, could we find a reason for him to be under pressure? Yes, but in overall, I don't think so.
I totally agree with you. I don't think there's any pressure on Kolton. He's a superstar on and off the field, and I think he feels pressure on himself, but I don't think he's got pressure. All right, now I'm going to give you another name. This one's going to surprise you, but I want you to think about it for a minute. Jakobi Meyers. Do you think there's pressure on Jakobi? I'm going to go first on this one. Okay. He's a 1. He's a WR1. And he plays on a team where he's a WR1B. Devontae is coming to a place in his career where even though he's still in his prime, he's got less years ahead of him than behind him. Is there pressure on Jakobi to continue to separate, to be able to show the Raiders, hey, when Devontae's done, I'm that guy. I'm that man. I think he already has. But is there a form of pressure on him to continue to differentiate himself as a 1?
Can I ask you this because I don't recall off the top of my head? Did he sign a 2 or 3 year contract? Jakobi.
I believe it was a 3, but while you're doing that, I'll check.
Okay, yeah. So I think in the sense of, hey, like you said, long term, right? If I'm assuming he enjoys being with the franchise. From everything I can tell, he enjoys being with the franchise. So yes, in that sense, he does have a pressure to show that, hey, I can kind of step up, if Devontae is not necessarily there, whatever it may be, I can do that. So I think in that sense, yes, he is under pressure. And if I'm not mistaken, like I said, depending on that contract, he may be under a little bit more pressure to get that next contract with the team. So in a sense, I do think there is some, but I do think if you look back at what he did last year, I mean, I think he had over 800 receiving yards and he missed the game, right? And he had over 800 receiving yards, and Devontae had 70 more targets on the season than he did, right? So imagine it. So imagine if Jacoby had like 10 or 20 of those, targets. Maybe he reaches 1,000, and didn't even play the full season. So I think on one hand, he's proven himself to a certain degree, but you all would have, in terms of the position he's in, you always want to follow up a good 1 year with 2 years in a row, right? So you can show that, hey, last year wasn't a fluke. This is what I am. This is what I'm going to be. So I think there's some pressure there.
I'm going to go a step further. I don't think he's under any pressure. And I'm going to tell you why. I think he sits there with his stats and says, hey, Devontae sure gets recognized a lot more than me. Devontae sure gets a lot more targets than me. Just saying. I think that guy, first of all, in the interest of fair disclosure, he's such a good guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he feels the pressure because he's producing. Mm-hmm. I literally think and the reason that goes with this, I had a person email and ask me about some players that he felt were under stress. And this person had Jacoby's name. And I'm thinking, I don't think he's under any stress. I think he feels good. I mean, would you not agree? In that locker room, he's one of the most relaxed guys.
Yeah, stress-free is his whole personality. I don't think there's any stress. But again, I do think he is like a lot of those guys, right? They're out there trying to feed their family, right? So I do think he's peaking a year from now, 2 years from now, saying, hey, what do I got to do right now to make sure I'm on the right trajectory a couple of years from now? So I think in that sense, there's a little bit of pressure from himself, but stress, far from it.
Okay, we're going to end with this guy, and there are others we could talk about, but we're going to end with this guy, and I'm going to go first. Actually, we're going to end with two guys, same position. Let's start Aidan O'Connell. I don't think there's any outside pressure on him, and I'm going to tell you why. His entire career, he was headed to a small Division III school, last minute picks up a Purdue offer. Goes to Purdue, or depending on who you listen to, he's 6th, 7th, or 8th on the depth chart. Wins it, performs well, projected to be a first-round draft pick, convinced to come back Purdue to their first ever Big Ten championship game. Steps in last year when Josh McDaniels did nothing to help him, just did his thing, gets the job. That kid, to me, I call him the Teflon kid. He puts so much expectation on him, a lot like Devontae. I don't think he feels any outside stress, and he certainly didn't show it this offseason at all. Am I wrong?
No, like you took the words right out of my mouth, really. I think so you got to think about him in terms of Aidan O'Connell. He's been an underdog pretty much every step of the way, and he's made it this far. No underdog gets this far without putting a crazy amount of pressure on themselves, right? So much so that there's no amount of pressure or critique that you can put on them that is worse than what he's saying to himself on a bad throw or a bad day, whatever it may be. He's tougher on himself than anybody else could ever be on him. So outside noise does not impact him at all. If anything, that's probably what's making him less stressed, right? Because everybody on the outside is predicting him to lose, right? So if he was to fail, it's just, that's what they thought he was going to do. He's putting more pressure on himself than anybody else. So from himself, yes, pressure. Outside, I don't think he cares about it that much. I think it motivates him.
100% agree. All right, now I said we're going to do one last guy, same position. You probably think I'm going to say Gardner, and I'm not. He's been a career backup. He is Mr. Lighthearted. He is a guy that, yeah, all right. You know what? I'm getting a lot of money to be a backup. I don't think that guy feels pressure about anything. But I'm going to give you a guy. I think Anthony Brown says, listen, if I'm going to stick around in this league, I'm going to have to show, I'm going to have to give example. And he's done something. That's why he's here. I think of all the quarterbacks, even though I don't think he's going to be the QB1, I think Anthony Brown feels the most pressure. Your thoughts?
Out of all three of them, he definitely feels the most pressure. Again, we just went down the list, right? Aiden, I don't think he's really feeling much pressure outside of what he puts on himself. Gardner, we don't want to say Gardner doesn't care because he definitely cares, but he's just so carefree, right? It's just his personality.
I mean, he doesn't care about the outside noise.
Yeah, like that's again. So I think we're on the same page on the first two. So out of those three, Brown definitely feels the most pressure. I think he probably, in a sense, has the most to lose out of all three, if you ask me as well. So I definitely think he feels the most pressure, no question at all.
Now, next week's going to be our really kicking in for training camp, but I'm going to ask you this, and we're going to let you go. Of the rookies, who are you most excited to see play? I'll go first. I'm excited to watch JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson. I'm going to tell you why. I think he's going to be a starter. Brock Bowers, I think, is going to be a starter, but I've watched him perform for so long at such a high level. I'm like, yeah, he's going to do it. I really believe that. I just have zero doubt about that kid. Tommy freaking Eichenberg, I think, is going to be really good, but I think there's such a group ahead of him. I'm not worried about his contribution this year. To me, JPJ is the one I'm going to be laser focused on. How about you?
Yeah, I think obviously in terms of what JPJ brings to the offense, because they need him to succeed in terms of the offensive line, I think a lot of the eyes are going to be on him. I think Brock Bowers is the easy choice, but you just named him. You know who I'm looking at. You know who I'm looking at. Now, listen again. Like you said, he's got three guys in front of him. Obviously, that's gonna affect his play time. Obviously, but when he gets on that field, man, I cannot wait to see him playing on the defensive side of the ball. Tommy's going to be a great addition to the linebacker group, and I just can't wait. That's who I'm excited to watch personally.
All right, I'm going to ask you something. Have you bought your Tommy Eichenberg Underoos pajamas yet?
Hey, I just laughed because, I mean, you remember, like, early in the offseason, I was like, linebacker.
linebacker. I had fans emailing me, what is Zeke's marriage to linebacker? And then you go get the guy you love in Tommy freaking Eichenberg.
Listen, that's it. So again, I don't mean to get too overexcited, but I love defense. I love great defensive line play. I love great linebacker play. I love it. And I mean, just watch the tape on the guy, right? And just imagine him in the silver and black. So I'm excited to see him play for sure.
Zeke, tell everybody your Twitter handle, please.
Yes, EZTREZ _SI. EZTREZ _SI.
We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.